Let me keep going here. So I think the other thing that companies now should be focused on, because I've seen a little too much of this with construction firms in the past. They have a lot of technology, and yet they are utilizing a fraction of what's available because they made the effort to implement and then they stopped. And I mean, they're still using the product, but only at the level that they got to, and not any of the advanced features. I mean, you can talk to Austin and ask him, in his customer base, what's the percent of ALMobile people are using? And I would venture, and I don't know this, he and I didn't prepare, but if it's 50, he would feel good. I think for a lot of software companies, that number can be somewhere between 20 and 30%. So there's a lot of value in these products that isn't being leveraged. So how do you go about increasing or improving that level of utilization? One way would be through process improvement. So take a look at a process end to end and identify all the places where there's inefficiency or drag. And what can we do to get that out of a given process? And that can include taking advantage of advanced features in a solution that you already have in place, not necessarily implementing something new. The idea of training is interesting. So many people implement software, they get training up front. Maybe they do a round of training with a vendor or their own team immediately on go live. But after that, it's do the best you can on the job training sort of thing. And it's unfortunate because I think there are new people in the organization that need to be shown how systems work, how we do things. Sometimes training involves more than how do we do it, but includes why do we do it? What's the benefit of entering our production values in ALMobile? What do we get from that? Well, if people see that, the value, then they're like, oh, okay, I get it. And then they'll participate. Another area that I think maximizes value is the notion of integration and deployment of middleware. There are good middleware solutions out there now that help move data from one system to another automatically. So time card data, production data, estimating, change orders, T&M tickets, equipment data. I mean, there's so much data in today's environment that moves back and forth. Having middleware in place to orchestrate that is tremendously valuable. It's not, I would say it depends on solution chosen. It can be expensive, but compared to the value that you're getting in terms of not having to do batch uploads or rekey data, pretty easy decision to make. The other area that I would encourage companies to take a look at is something called KPIs, key performance indicators. It's kind of a business term that people came up with to know things like gross profit on a job, days aging of accounts receivable, percent of costs unbilled on a job, number of days change orders have been unapproved, number of days that RFI has not been answered. I mean, take a look at the metrics. There's hundreds of them, but identify the ones that are key drivers to your success and make sure your systems are delivering that. You should not have to go to a spreadsheet to ask accounting to find some of these key metrics. They're too important. When you think about, here's an analogy, and I didn't have this intended when I put this diagram into the slide, but when you think about how you drive, maybe how you used to drive and how we drive today in terms of having GPS navigation, all this information at our fingertips. I mean, you really want for very little information when you're driving. The car is taking care of a lot and it's giving you information. Do I need to stop for gas? Am I following the speed limit? Now it's got GPS tracking, so it lets you know if you're drifting and cross the lane. So all that information is instantaneous as you need it. Are your business systems that responsive? That would be a good question. Now, I think you also want to know and think about something called organizational readiness. That's a mouthful. But what I'm really trying to get at there is how ready is your organization for the kind of change that needs to take place right now? And for most organizations, I would say not very. I've only been around probably 400 or 500 construction firms in my career, so I may not know all that is out there, but I have seen some good examples. Companies that embrace change, companies that are ready and willing and able to uh, go forward with new technology, change processes, break things, who aren't wedded to processes of the past. And they're kind of in a continual improvement mantra, if you will, in the organization. And that culture sort of becomes pervasive. And people that actually don't like change weed themselves out pretty quick in organizations. I would say that a position that we've seen become tremendously valuable in many construction firms is that of a business analyst. We didn't used to have that position in the industry, but it is someone who basically has responsibility for helping facilitate process change. They look at software, they talk to IT, they talk to the user community, they talk to the vendor, they make sure that processes are aligned, they help with testing, they help with training. They are constant presence in and concentration in helping facilitate that process change. And they can do multiple initiatives at one time. The number of business analysts you have would probably depend on size of organization, the amount of change. But um, this is a group that is very um, uh, uh, active in change management. The other role that I would say is not new, but is gaining more currency is that of power users. Power users are individuals in the organization who know one product really well. They're champions, if you will, of that product, whether it's a project management solution, timekeeping solution, HR solution, job cost, whatever it is, they know a lot about it. They know more than the average user. They make sure that everyone's using it correctly. They provide spot training as needed. They can handle first round of help if needed. They go to vendor conferences. They interact with IT. I mean, they are a central point in the deployment and use of that application. The more of those that exist, the better off the organization is. Change management is a big concept. I'm not going to spend a ton of time there, but just know that there are disciplines around change management in the organization and helping companies with migrating from one way and one system to a completely new way and helping people get comfortable with the change that's taking place. That's a big sort of initiative onto itself. And lastly, for organizational readiness, I would say is the idea of LMS, learning management systems. These are solutions, sometimes on their own, sometimes as part of their HR application, where all of a company's, think of it as a library of your internal processes, procedures, documentation for a given software system, or just a process in general. How does the company do change orders? And maybe it involves a workflow that you did in Visio. Maybe it includes some documentation and white paper. Maybe it includes a Camtasia or Captivate video clip of somebody keying in a change order in the ERP. But this library becomes very rich and very customized for the organization so that we don't have to guess. Because one of the things that really does sort of slow organizations down with deployment is when you have too much, um, when you don't have proper training, when people don't understand how to use things, they get frustrated. They're like, oh, this is too much work. And then they go back to spreadsheets. Having an LMS at the ready that's comfortable, that is quick, responsive, is very valuable. And we're seeing more construction firms actually deploy LMS and build out that content for their own organization. So these are some of the larger trends, I would say, that we're seeing in construction and the impact that they're having on most firms. And I think that taking stock of where you are is almost step number one. How do we know how we're doing? I'm going to take a moment, if I'm permitted by the Austin Lane organization, and let you know that we have something called a best practices assessment tool. And there's no charge for this. It's on our website, and it is a platform that allows you to walk through and answer questions about your procure to pay process, your time card HR and payroll process, your billing quote to cash process. It looks at each one of those, engages your system and your process, and gives you a score. It also compares you to average and best in class companies inside the database. So if you are inclined and want to know where you stand, this best practice assessment tool is a good place to start. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of your user conference. And if you have any questions about the material or some of these ideas, feel free to reach out to me at crberger@bergerconsulting.com. Thanks, everybody. Have a great conference.